where we first began to hear this term public-private partnership. There was a kind of a radical move, I think, in economics to reframe how we understood public spending. And so new forms of kind of amassing capital came together. And I think that we're at another point in that kind of trajectory where we have to find a new language to describe new conditions, new configurations around wealth, around scale, around charity, around giving, around empowering.
This panel I've been so looking forward to all day. Charlotte Wagner, Lesley Lokko, Marika Shaw, Karen Conway, and Beth Foster-Chao. We're making this a conversation. And so what we wanted to do with this session is really talk about how we fuel this work, what it means to not only imagine the work that's possible, but also imagine new ways of kind of fueling this work. A century ago, back in the 1920s, a small group of visionaries set out to reshape a world through a radical experiment in giving. They called it the American Fund for Public Service, otherwise known as the Radical Fund, a movement that used philanthropy not just to give away money or meet basic needs in the present, but to give form and direction to the future. Their experiments, some of them were risky, uncertain, and even improbable at the time, have really helped lay the groundwork for new institutions today in labor and civil rights and free expression. Last year, the historian John Fabian Witt published a book called The Radical Fund. And in it, he reminded us that human beings, their projects, and their institutions carve grooves into the future. So that's what this conversation is going to be about today, the grooves that we are carving now through imagination, courage, and the choices that we make together. So each of our panelists approaches this idea of philanthropy and support and imagination from a different perspective: design, culture, philanthropy, imagination. I'm going to ask them each in sort of a first round to introduce themselves, and I have some questions as well. I think at the heart of some of this, we heard really from Mohammed in the last session, this idea of how do we balance kind of the urgency of now with the larger systemic changes that we want to make. So Lesley Lokko, I'm going to start with you. Your work from the Laboratory of the Future and the African Futures Institute has really invited the world to see Africa not as a recipient of philanthropy, but rather as a source of imagination. You've observed also that in Africa, in some ways, everyone is a philanthropist. It comes to people naturally through kinship, through care and shared responsibility, even with perhaps not the benefits of inherited wealth. So start us off and share with us how you see philanthropy's role in contexts where perhaps generosity is abundant, but capital may be scarce. And what might the global philanthropy learn from that reality about power and culture and possibility?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. I feel these days I start off every answer by saying it's a really complex question, but it is a complex question, partly because it's a complex context. And the impulse to give, let's call it charity, I think is embedded in most cultures. I don't think there's a culture alive that doesn't in some way insist upon giving as a form of community building. But if I think back to maybe the 1980s or early 90s, where we first began to hear this term public-private partnership, there was a kind of a radical move, I think, in economics to reframe how we understood public spending. And so new forms of kind of amassing capital came together. Now we think of public-private funding as a kind of given. And I think that we're at another point in that kind of trajectory where we have to find a new language to describe new conditions, new configurations around wealth, around scale, around charity, around giving, around empowering. And I don't think that our current terminology extends past that. So when I hear the word philanthropy, for me, it's still very much caught in a 18th, 19th century framework of giving, of great wealth, the kind of noblesse oblige, like with great wealth comes great responsibility. But we're in a moment now in history where actually great wealth has become even greater. I mean, we're about to birth the first trillionaire. Like, I don't even know what that means. And so, at a time when philanthropy is shrinking, actually inequity is growing. So, there's more capital in the system, but less impetus, less moral obligation to give. So, I think it's a really critical moment. And if I think back to my own context, when I said every, every African alive is already a philanthropist, we talk here in the United States about black tax. I mean, it's the same principle that you give to others. How do you scale that up? I don't think we have the language or even the imagination about how financially you could do it, much less socially. So I think we're at a really critical moment. And when we talk all the time about inequity and inequality, about the kind of gulf widening between rich and poor, we're not also thinking about inventive ways to make it possible to close that. So it's a really complex but really urgent question. Mm.
We also heard today about the trauma tax. And Charlotte, I know that at the Wagner Foundation, an idea of belonging is kind of core to your mission. And you're working both here in the US and also in the sort of global health space as well. How have you thought about this idea of belonging across these cultural divides and through your work with the foundation?
Yeah, and I think I'll probably pick up on a lot of what you were saying. I think so. We are Wagner Foundation. We've been around for 20 years, and as you said, we've been focused on health equity, on economic well-being, and really the transformative power of arts. And really, we believe that all of those things are critically important, essential components to well-being and health. Um, I think one of the most important things that needs to change around philanthropy from this kind of early 19th century way of or 20th century way of thinking about it is really to listen first. I think if you were to look back, I mean, I think there were great philanthropists who invested in public libraries and those sorts of things. But I think in order to belong, and this idea of belonging, it's really about being seen and about having the opportunity to chart your own path, the opportunity to grow as you would like to grow. And that really starts in community. It starts in what is available in a community, what is possible in a particular community. And so I think to start with listening, to start with having the community be the stewards of where the investments need to be made, I think is really the starting place to feeling like you can grow in a community and communities can grow likewise, so that everybody who lives in that community can stay in that community, and there can be development without displacement, and that we, are able to really think about well-being in a holistic way.
Beth, I'm going to turn to you, Beth Foster-Chao from the Autodesk Foundation, and ask you a little bit about this idea that I know is core to your model around de-risking innovation, giving people the opportunity as they identify their goals to be able to fulfill those goals and really support their vision. So how are you at the Autodesk Foundation understanding this idea about de-risking and innovation and supporting it both globally and nationally, where also there's such a diversity of kind of strengths and weaknesses in these markets, and understanding how when things are so unevenly distributed, what does it mean then to invest in people's abilities to fulfill their goals?
I love that question. And we think a lot about the balance of risk and impact and urgency and resilience and systemic change a lot at the Autodesk Foundation. Really wonderful to be with you all today. For those that don't know Autodesk Foundation, we're the philanthropic arm of Autodesk Inc., the global design and make software company. And we were founded just over a decade ago with the mission of supporting those using design and make and engineering and innovation and imagination towards social and environmental impact. How can we support those innovators? So it's not surprising that, when looking for innovation, when looking for talent, when looking for impact, it led us to build a global portfolio, including working with Mass from probably day one. But for us as a philanthropy, philanthropic capital is so precious. It can be very patient, it can be flexible, and it can be risk tolerant in a way that a lot of other capital can't be. And so for us, that's really meant going towards innovations that really aim to reach those that existing market dynamics probably aren't going to reach and are going to continue to overlook. And it's also led us to look at innovation ecosystems and support organizations that are really supporting the entrepreneurs who, again, there's the idea, there's the talent, there's the need for impact, but the enabling environment around those entrepreneurs is maybe not there yet. And the support structures aren't right there yet. We heard an example of the difference between trying to find a makerspace or machining and tools in Malawi versus at Dartmouth. There's this really big discrepancy between that supports ecosystem. So what that's led us to is to build this global portfolio of nonprofit partners, startups, but also entrepreneur support organizations like venture studios and impact funds. And then it's also led us to think beyond just financial capital as a philanthropy to say, what else could we harness as Autodesk Foundation? And because of that tie to Autodesk Inc., it's meant that we've also looked to leverage our software. So we donate our software, we support from a technical assistance perspective, all with this idea that innovators need more than just capital. They need access, they need networks, they need, if you're a hardware innovator, you need a makerspace and the ability to physically, do physical prototypes. You need design software and so on. So how can we really equip innovators globally, help level the playing fields where there are discrepancies so that all these ideas and this potential for impact can really blossom?
And Marika Shaw, your work with Plus One as a musician yourself, and then now really a culture and joy builder, you've harnessed kind of a network and a movement to transform a culture of giving through kind of a celebration of arts and culture. Tell us about how you see the role of joy and art and imagination in sharing like this sense of belonging and a commitment to giving and participation.
So I think, Plus One was really built on this belief of where are people already gathering and how are we together. And today we've heard a lot of stories about how important space is for gathering and how communities are being brought together and the role of art in that. And here we are at ICA and the role of art in that. And so with Plus One, it started primarily with musicians who gather people every night all over the world, all over the country. And in our gathering and through joy and through experiencing something really powerful together. And I was thinking of our power poses and breathing together and singing together and all of these things. Plus One artists also put their hand up to agree that a portion of everything that they make as part of their business is contributed back into the community. And so it's an embedded philanthropy that really believes in community coming together and not just singing about it and not just convening about it and spending time together, but also injecting some of that capital investment back into the communities that really need it. And so that means that we now have, 415 artists everywhere from, small country stars, big country stars, Andrea Bocelli, Sabrina Carpenter, kind of where we have this simultaneous effect, weaving between people convening and enjoying and being together. And so I see joy as being not separate from, but a real possibility for making progress, and not having philanthropy always kind of be over there while other work in life is happening over here, but really integrating where we are and what we enjoy and what brings us all together in a very, very concrete way to also be contributing to the future that we believe in, and the I think moral compass that we can kind of attach ourselves to.
At lunch earlier, we had a lunch for the participants and the kind of talent earlier, and Karen gave us a most beautiful welcome, a board member of both the ICA and really our first and 011 board member at Mass Design, an idea about investing in design as an agent and a tool of change. So incredible to see the magnificence that your belief in us, first through Mass, and then honestly through helping us start the Abundant Futures work many years ago. Congratulations. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'm humbled to be here with all of you, so doing such incredible work and participating in so many meaningful ways. And I love the community that there is for philanthropy. From my particular angle on this is that I'm an architect. When I met the founders 15, 16 years ago, I was so impressed with the sort of naivete, but also determination of the hospital, the fact that Butaro and Partners in Health had trusted them, or Paul Farmer had really said, you need to do this, and that was a call to action. And so it was easy for me. There was no question that that was something that was really exciting to support. And it was a very small support. And so through the years, Mass has continued to kind of punch above their weight, change the dialogue, kind of help other communities see how design, how communities, how belonging, how all these things, wellness through designing in health, has really been able to change communities. And so I think so much of that for me is leadership. You have strong leaders, people who believe in what they're doing. And so a lot of, for me, in terms of believing in something or supporting something is, what's fueling that ambition, what's fueling that passion. And so I think through everybody's sort of contributions and different ways of seeing this, also through the ICA, which we've supported for a long time, the artists really changed the way we think. The people at Mass, the team is just so impressive and so dynamic. And I think it's really a tribute to the team that has really started with a very small, donation in a way to build into this incredible organization. And so, in terms of, you brought up the Abundant Futures Lab, we were doing so much work in landscape, it seemed crazy not to have a landscape lab. And again, the team has really morphed that into Abundant Futures. So I couldn't be more proud and humbled that is actually happening.
Amazing. We're going to do maybe one more round, and then I want to open it up. So folks who have questions out there and comments, I'm going to be looking for you. I can't see you very well, but we'll pass the mic around. Charlotte, some of this, what struck you most around this idea of imagination today, of philanthropy as kind of an act of imagination? What do you see in terms of both the physical, the social infrastructures that kind of create the conditions for people to imagine their own futures? And yes, for us to invest in both the physical infrastructure, but also the imaginative capabilities of people.
I think, Paul Farmer would often say that, that we couldn't accomplish things because of a lack of imagination. And I think we can accomplish anything that we set our mind to. And this whole day has really been about that and has demonstrated, I think, amazing entrepreneurs doing things against odds and with tremendous imagination. I think, looking at the systems and taking a systems change lens, which we do, it reminds us that everything is connected and that we need everybody, and everybody has a role to play, whether it's government has a role to play, philanthropy. Certainly, I think corporate America has a role to play in imagining a different path forward, a different future. And I think, looking for specific investments and specific projects in new and different ways, like a community land trust, or space for artists and artist studios, where people can start to build assets, can stay in a community that can really look to maintain that sense of belonging. I think is really an important piece of it. And I think, art and artists are, and creative thinkers are really the folks we have to look to, and we do look to imagine a different way of proceeding forward, and thinking about how we can change the way we've been doing it. I mean, if these grooves are very deep, we need to sort of break out of them, break out of kind of the silos that we've been in, and try to find this common ground and collective way of working together. And we're spending a lot of time either working with other foundations, working with governments, and trying our best to find projects that you wouldn't expect, like a Boston Medical Center that's investing in a grocery store in a neighborhood that, contains its patients, and that then goes, it creates more jobs in the neighborhood. It grows that business in the neighborhood. It has culturally relevant meals in that neighborhood. And so Boston Medical Center, as a medical center, understanding that they can put some of their resources and their ambition outside of the hospital walls. It's about going upstream and finding other ways of using your gifts, your talents, your money, your resources, to break out of the rut that you've been in, or we've been in as a society. So those are the kinds of projects that we look for. Often things are at the intersection of two different avenues, where we find some real imaginative project that everybody is the beneficiary of, when those things come together.
Beth, last week I got to meet one of your grantees who was sort of revolutionizing some work in the field of agriculture. And I heard you say that you see the opportunity to work in this field of philanthropy actually is like this remarkable gift for you to, in some ways, be able to see the future, because the ideas that are seeds now are the things that are going to become this larger spark for transformation later.
Yeah, this was something a mentor of mine told me a decade or so ago, was this is one of the biggest gifts is getting to meet with innovators who can kind of give you a glimpse for what's around the corner. And I think for us at Autodesk Foundation, to really make sure that we are thinking about those future ideas and those transformative ideas, we always start with the question, if successful, does it matter? So when we're evaluating an idea and a new opportunity, if successful, does it matter? And I think that allows us both to embrace that risk level, right? To say it doesn't necessarily have to be proven yet. So there is that uncertainty, but also to help us distinguish between ultimately what might be more incremental impact versus truly step change and transformative impact. And we really want to make sure that, we're directing that work towards transformation, while still thinking about viability, still doing our homework. Being risk tolerant isn't being reckless. And for us, one of the clearest signals for the viability and the scalability of an idea is the inclusivity of a solution, and whether this is an entrepreneur that's really addressing some of the fundamental challenges and the structural inequities in policy or the power dynamics in a sector, but also how much that they've engaged the community, the supposed beneficiaries, and is it just a consultation? Is it a checkbox? Or are they co-creators and co-designers? And what we found is those are the more effective solutions. Those are the solutions that are ultimately adopted, that scale, and so on. And so inclusion is often talked about as like something on the side, and we found it to be one of the core elements of assessing viability of a very visionary idea.
So Marika and Karen and Lesley, because we want to get to questions from the audience, I'm just going to ask you to go and to sort of say, what does this future look like? Like, what are you excited about most from what you've heard today, what you can imagine, how we can harness some of these tools of joy, of design, of imaginative thinking, of changing some paradigms? Just each of you. Yeah.
I just think, just to follow up on imagination and seeing the future, is this catalyst funding, seed funding. Nonprofits like Mass and others depend on some amount of funds being more bendable, so that they can actually explore and test things. And so I think that's a really important when investing in the future, and when creativity, all these creative, incredibly brilliant people kind of trying to change the world, make it a better place. Well, let's help them.
They need fuel. They need fuel. Marika, any thoughts?
I think too, seeing kind of examples of it not being all or nothing sometimes too, of having examples of being good neighbors and kind of participating in community and doing what you can. I think that sometimes these problems that we're being confronted with, and the scarcity mindset and fear and division, it can feel so overwhelming that small actions actually feel or can feel almost paralyzing or useless in many, many ways. And I think what we try to unblock is that we can have collective small actions, and that we can be in community, and as opposed to it being kind of like the hero's journey and the individual self-actualization of this, that what about our community journey together, and how can we kind of create the community as a self, not just one audience, but together, these small actions really.
The value of showing up. I think we heard that from
Showing
Susan
up.
Goldberg as well. So nice.
I'm going to say two things, and I'll try to say them quite quickly because I know we have a Q&A coming up. But recently in Venice, I was invited by a whiskey company to talk about the relationship between architecture and whiskey making. And
I have friends from Kentucky, so they have opinions on this.
so, as I was, making the speech and everything, I saw a few friends of mine in the audience who were sort of saying, "God, Lesley, you're really stretching it here." and it struck me that actually the luxury goods companies, they're the kind of new Medicis of this age, and that's where a lot of the kind of money in philanthropy goes. But the second thing is also connected to Venice, was when I was running out of money very, very fast. Because no one tells you that you have to raise money in order to put on a biennale. I rang Darren Walker at Ford Foundation, and I just said to him, "Look, I'm running out of cash. We've got all of these fantastic young architects, mostly from the continent and the diaspora. I need some help." And he just said to me, "Girl, I am not going to see you fail. Let me step in here." And I thought that there was a relationship that he and I had. We had we sort of knew one another, but there was a connection between us that went beyond giving. Most philanthropists give because you have a relationship with them. No one ever tells you about that when you're starting to raise funds. Most philanthropists are interested in your story. And if you've got a good story, you will find a supporter. But when you get into the game, no one really tells you that that's the way to start building relationships and building trust. And at the end of the day, it boils down to, can someone trust you to deliver on what you say you're going to deliver? And that's an aspect, I think, of philanthropy that now when we sort of criminalize immigration, if you think about what migrants to cultures have done for the field of philanthropy, it's almost all based on them wanting to belong. So this notion of belonging, of trying to find an anchor in a society is it's in the DNA of giving. And I think we're often losing sight of these really primal motives, which are not criminal, are not dismissive. They're part and parcel of it.
What questions do you all have out there? Here, I've got one right up front.
We just saw this young man say we got it all the way to the point that now we have to have the building money for this, and this gets pulled. This, to me, is the valley of death. Like, we're looking to scale these things. Where is that now? Do you have some opinions as to where to look?
Who wants to take this one?
I would say in the beginning, I was told, look to America. That as a nation, Americans give more than any other nation. It's not exactly true, but there is something kind of deeply embedded in American wealth, which is about giving. And we hear a lot about innovation in finance, and I think that the same innovations in philanthropy need to come not just from those of us working in the built environment sectors, but in finance, in business, in entrepreneurship, in tax laws, in figuring out, what is the infrastructure, the financial infrastructure of giving that makes it both profitable, moral, and good to give.
Yeah, I think all of those are really important foundational principles of giving that need to be in place. I think there is no one answer to that question. There is no one foundation, I don't think, that could be responsible for that. It is about putting together a coalition of a group of folks that want to see a project like that come to fruition. Mass does actually, in their own way, try to create the materials, create the even the plan to try to go out and raise that kind of capital to do a building project, and then try to bring in philanthropists from different areas, and then try to bring in different types of financing. It could come in the Malawi case, maybe from the government, some small piece of it, and they could be a part of it. But it is a complicated puzzle, I think, this day and age to put together.
Yes, please, Geeta. Thank you for the mic. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Geeta Pradhan with the Cambridge Community Foundation. So, Lesley, you talked when you started out about the need for imagining a new future, and I look at the future of philanthropy. It's actually not foundations. It's the wealth transfer is happening in individuals, and there's going to be a tremendous amount of wealth, and at the same time, a tremendous amount of inequality. And I just wonder, really, I think we need to think in more radical ways than we are thinking right now. Maybe it is the idea of having those free pots of money in the community, to fuel people's imagination, and having that infrastructure that you talked about that surrounds them with being able to actually really realize that imagination into something real. But I wanted a little more reflection from all of you on that aspect, of what can we do to radicalize philanthropy a little more.
I think of in many ways, Mohammed told us his story about being kind of ready to get building, and then USAID kind of pulled out. But in that, we complained about USAID for years. We wanted it. We didn't want it to end the way it did, but we also complained about it as an entity, many of us. Now, people like Mohammed are not going to let that stop him. But yeah, what are the kind of breakthroughs or reforms or ideas that are going to move us into the next dimension? Anyone who wants to take that on?
I have what I can't believe is still a radical idea, but it is, which is, and I love the question around how we fund is also really important to ask ourselves. And providing unrestricted general operating funds to organizations. Still such a radical idea. So many foundations can't wrap their heads around it. But if you think about what allows an organization to invest in their team, to try out new ideas, to be able to pivot when there are these huge swings in funding and figure out how to navigate these moments, it's that. And that you know the organization, you've done your due diligence on them. Give them the funds and don't micromanage the funds.
I mean, it's such a great point. I've never had restricted funds when I've been operating for 4 years, and it's always been unrestricted, and it's partly because of the precedent that Darren set. But I'm working at the moment with a donor where we've involved a psychologist. And it's been a really interesting exercise to kind of break through the power relations between donor and recipient and to try to reframe our language. Now, it's a really enlightened philanthropist who's going to go that far, but I would have to say that there have been some of the most radical and also some of the most uncomfortable conversations I've had, because both they and I, we have to strip away who we are in this relationship to get towards a common goal. So I think the relationship between the personal, the professional, the philanthropic, the powerful, all of these things just make it a really complex relationship. So I think the radical agenda is desired, but how you get to that radicality, how do you facilitate it, is a much tougher question than I thought I was prepared to answer.
Well, we want to hear ideas from everyone who's in this room. I know you all have the different ideas that you have, the things that you support, the networks that you're part of. So we'd love, all of us, I think, to hear your ideas about radicalizing this moment in philanthropy. And thank you all so much for being here and having this conversation. And, I think this whole day has just really shown us that this idea that abundance is in no way about excess. It's really about being in relationship. I love this beautiful example. It's kind of the courage to act now, but also invest in and build for the long term. I love the idea that philanthropy, but also design is fundamentally optimistic. It's about seeing into the future. It's about proposing something that doesn't exist now. It's about a kind of active imagination and creating a culture and a vehicle, really, for belonging and a form of accompaniment, which many of us have learned so much. So together, I think we learned that to give and to build is really to imagine. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.